Ladies and gentlemen, friends of Israel. The theme I've taken for myself is human rights reality and its reflection in the UN. I've chosen it because I think our record is exemplary and it's been ignored studiously by the UN. The title of the whole conference, I suspect drafted by Professor Andrzejewski, is Hijacking Human Rights. For it's correctly, it is not only the UN that has been hijacked, human rights have suffered the same ignoble fate. The idea of universal human rights was, to a large extent, the result of the Holocaust, and Jewish ideas and thinkers played a central part in drafting the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, referred to by the previous speaker. The Arab states have, however, wisely, from their point of view, turned the Western goal of universal human rights into a very effective, insidious anti-Israeli tool. Professor Irvin Kotler wrote, I'm quoting, "Indeed, in a world where human rights have emerged as the new secular religion of our time, Israel, portrayed as a meta-rights violator, emerges as the new antichrist of the international arena." It's sometimes argued that these defamatory resolutions of UN human rights bodies carry no public weight. They can be safely ignored. The Arab states, however, know better. We shouldn't fall into the Israeli trap of shmum, or poo-pooing the importance of a state's human rights image. It's important. Human rights are a powerful tool of international relations. We should remember our own history. To a large extent, it was the image in world public opinion of the ship Exodus, Yetziat Mitzrayim, with its Jewish refugees being returned to Europe, that forced the mighty British Empire to relinquish its mandate over Palestine. Many attribute the commencement of the crumbling of the Soviet Union to the worldwide campaign for Soviet Jewry, to which Ambassador Max Kampelman played a considerable part. Pictures of Sharansky and other Soviet fuseniks carried in streets, I think, made a greater impact than national public relations campaigns. We shouldn't ignore what the Arab states are managing to do with this human rights. In many countries, nearly all those involved in foreign relations and in the academic world have spent time in the corridors of the UN, absorbing this poison. For many young diplomats, service in the UN is their pupillage in world politics. In this UN world, artificial and stilted as it may be, the Arab states have succeeded in branding Israel as the pariah, the new apartheid South Africa. And this image, this nefarious image, is being spread by lecturers in universities, in the States as well, and by NGOs, some well-meaning or otherwise. And frankly, I think we ignore this at our peril. As has been pointed out, the Arab states have hijacked the United Nations human rights mechanisms. And of course, it is the Human Rights Council that is perhaps the most nefarious of the lot. It's completely in the hold of non-democratic states. It even has an official like-minded group of states that in fact control the voting to a large extent, consisting of such luminaries as Algeria, Bangladesh, Belarus, which I think is no longer a party, Bhutan, China, Cuba, Egypt, India, Indonesia, Iran, Malaysia, Myanmar with its wonderful record, Nepal, Pakistan, Philippines, Sri Lanka, Sudan, Vietnam, and Zimbabwe. I think actually that India and the Philippines should be ashamed of being in that crowd. But this is what Ambassador Yitzhak Lebanon faces in the Geneva Human Rights Body. You've heard of its condemnations of Israel being singled out, It's interesting, Freedom House made a list of the 19 worst offenders of human rights in the world. Belarus, Burma, Myanmar, China, Cuba, Equatorial Guinea, Eritrea, Haiti, Laos, Libya, Morocco, North Korea, Russia, Saudi Arabia, Somalia, Syria, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, and Zimbabwe. Only one of them has been mentioned in resolutions of the Council. This is what we're up against. This pattern, by the way, of the Human Rights Council is followed in the UN treaty monitoring bodies. Again, something that Professor Bayovsky has made a special study of. These are bodies set up to find out how states are cooperating or implementing UN human rights treaties. I personally had the unpleasant experience of appearing before one of these bodies in Geneva. It's called CERD, the Committee for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. We carefully prepared a documented survey of Israeli legislation and court decisions, and our record is good on this. We expected to have a professional dialogue. Instead, we were met by a barrage of accusations, including one that, I'm quoting, Israel was obviously a racist state. Why? Lama? Since we have a Jewish religious symbol, the Star of David, on our flag. I perhaps diplomatically refrained from commenting, or at least not commenting publicly, that is, on what symbol appeared on the flag of our host state. It was taking place in Geneva. And they had the temerity to accuse us of being racist because we had the Magen David. By the way, I didn't make a comment. I looked round, flags of Sweden, Denmark, Norway, or even the United Kingdom, by the way, which has 3 crosses. And they have the chutzpah to say we're a racist state because we have the Magen David on it, on our flag. I read, before I came here, the latest report by this committee on Israel. And again, I'm quoting. The committee notes with concern that military service provides highly advantageous access to various public services, which is true, for example, in the field of housing and education. And here comes the pearl. Such a policy is not compatible with the Convention, bearing in mind that most Arab Israeli citizens do not perform national service. Reading that, I thought of the US GI Bill of Rights, obviously a clearly racist document. The theme I want to take, again, is Israel's real record, and I think it's something we can be proud of. In any sane world, our record on human rights would be held up as an example of how a state which is at war and combating terrorism can nevertheless combine to uphold human rights. By the way, if I can again quote in Latin, that's the chokhmah. It's a state that's fighting terrorism and at war where you can test how it upholds human rights. And our record is fabulous. Because every state has officials or policemen or soldiers who at times behave immorally and in violation of human rights. This is true of any society. The test, however, is whether that behavior is sanctioned by the state and how do the state's courts and prosecutors react to such behavior. I believe, and I won't make any comment on our state here, where I'm a host, but I think our record can compete even with that of the United States after 9/11. It was Israeli court that ruled. The power of, and I'm quoting from an Israeli court decision, which, by the way, binds the government. The power of society to stand against its enemies is based on its recognition that it is fighting for values that deserve protection. The rule of law is one of these values. We have established here a law-abiding state that realizes its national goals and the vision of generations, and does so while recognizing and realizing human rights in general and human dignity in particular. I continue with a quote. The well-known saying of Cicero that in battle laws are silent, inter arma silent leges, does not reflect the law as it is. By the way, I always like quoting in Latin because there's nobody with any real authority who can correct my pronunciation. On a number of issues, I think we're ahead of the most democratic of Western states. Again, it was a Canadian Supreme Court in June that ruled that the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which is an impressive document, does not apply to actions of Canadian law enforcement officials outside of Canadian territory. However, in Israel, the Supreme